I'm ready.
All right. So, my name is Bill Strayhall, and I'm here to introduce Martin O'Malley. If any of you know me, you know I've been in politics pretty much my whole life, and that's not an exaggeration. And it's always been about social and economic justice. So when I look for support, I'm looking for the person that to me best exemplifies social and economic justice. So at one time, my mentor was Lane Evans. I worked in the Senate for Tom Harkin. So you can see what kind of Democrat I am. So I'm looking around at presidential candidates, and I saw this man named Martin O'Malley, who has the most incredible progressive record in the state of Maryland, either as the mayor of Baltimore or the governor. And if you look, it's like he doesn't just talk about doing things.
He's done it.
He's already done it. He set the bar, he set the record, and anybody else is coming along now talking about marriage equality, equal rights, minimum wages, affordable college. The list, long list here, I was prepared to read it, but I'll let him tell you about what he's done. If you want a progressive, if you want a guy who has a track record, who has the administrative experience, is a good progressive, this is my friend Martin O'Malley.
Hey, Bev, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming out on a cold, rainy evening in Scott County. It is awesome to see all of you. And I also think I saw the chair of Muscatine. Yes, Muscatine County. Good to see you again, Mr. Chairman. I have now visited 62 of your counties, and I've got 24 days to go. So I'm psyched to be with all of you tonight. Let me acknowledge Richard Dunn, Alderman Richard Dunn. Richard, thank you for your support, and thank you for being here. Roxanne Moritz, thank you for being here as well. And is that former Mayor Gluba? And former Mayor Bill Gluba. Very good to see you. And let me thank Jerry Mesmer for allowing us to be here in his home at UFCW. Jerry, thank you. All right, let's begin. News of the day. News of the day. The news of the day is that some executives at NBC think that the next debate maybe should only have 2 candidates instead of 3.
What?
They're treating your presidential selection process as if it's another episode of The Apprentice. Bad enough that they let Mr. Chairman of Scott County, thank you for being here, Mr. Chairman. Bad enough that we would be limited to only 4 debates, and that they would hide them on Saturdays behind football games. But now they tell us that they can't really manage perhaps a 3-way race. Well, I've got news for them. This election is not up to NBC executives, not up to pollsters. It's up to you, the people of Iowa. And we have 24 days to go. I love your state. I love the beauty of your state. I love the warmth of your people and the kindness of your state. And I also love something else about your state. You're not intimidated by big money. You're not intimidated by pollsters. You do what you think is right for our country. And time again, you have lifted up for our country a new leader and pointed the way forward. So I'm not here tonight, though, to praise you. I'm here to challenge you. Because our country needs new leadership, and we need it right now. The American people are scanning the horizon, looking for a new leader. And unfortunately, if they fix on the new leadership that's being offered by the Republican Party, that is not a prescription forward. That is not the sort of progress that would make our country stronger, better, more prosperous for our kids. No. I want to challenge you, Iowa, to do that which you do best. And time again, regardless of what the polls have said, when caucus night rolls around, you always have the way of upsetting the apple cart, don't you? And with only 3 of us in the race, I'm the only one that can still upset the apple. So let's begin. Look, I need your help. We are 24 days away from the Iowa caucuses. And I need your help. Here in Iowa, it's all about the individual person. It's about ideas. It's about how we come together as a community to find a way forward. My story is not the story of a Democratic conversion. It is rather the story of a Democratic upbringing. I was born to Tom and Barbara O'Malley, two of the kindest and gentlest people God ever put on this planet. And they were born into the Great Depression and became part of that generation Tom Brokaw dubbed the greatest. And they, by winning the Second World War. My dad flew 33 missions over Japan in a B-24 Liberator. But thank you, my dad. Died 10 years ago this week. But my parents never took that title of greatest upon themselves. And you know people of that generation. They don't do that. No. They raised all of us, and they taught us that every generation has a responsibility and a duty to do great things for their country so that they can give their children a better future. No people ever gave their children a better future by making their country weaker. My parents taught us to love God, to love our family, and to love our country. They also taught us to understand that there is dignity in every person, that we all share a common good as Americans, that we're all in this together and we have to help each other if we're going to succeed. The experience I offer to you, and this is the way it works, right? Candidates offer, the people decide. The experience I offer you is not the experience of a congressperson or a senator, though that's fine that good people choose to do those jobs for us. My experience is not that of an advisor or a cabinet secretary. My experience is that of an executive, a mayor, and a governor, bringing people together, getting things done, bringing people together oftentimes over great divides in order to save lives, to reduce crime, to reduce overdose deaths. These are actions, not words, and these are the things that I have spent my life doing for others. Among those actions that move us forward, raising the minimum wage, passing a living wage, making it easier for people to join labor unions, and bargain collectively for better wages for all of us, right? We raised to the highest level in the nation our goals for minority and women business inclusion, and we exceeded them in a recession. We defended the highest median wage all the way through the recession, AAA bond rating. We passed marriage equality. We passed the DREAM Act. We passed comprehensive gun safety legislation with a ban on combat assault weapons. You see, my executive experience, my experience as a mayor and as a governor, has been to take the actions that include more of our people more fully in the economic, social, and political life that we share together. That's how states make themselves stronger and better. That's how countries make themselves stronger and better. My wife and I have 4 terrific kids, Grace and Tara and William and Jack. And my oldest daughter, Grace, is a school teacher. Any school teachers here? All right. Democratic event, there's always school teachers. A true story, about 6 or 7 months ago, after her father announced for president, my daughter returned to her first grade class at Walter P. Carter Elementary School in the heart of Baltimore City. 100% adorable, eager to learn African-American kids. And a little girl came up to her and tugged her on the sleeve and said, "Miss O'Malley, I'm not so sure about this idea of your father running for president, because quite frankly, I kind of like Barack Obama." Well, a lot of us like Barack Obama, right? 8 years ago, Iowa, you pointed the way forward. 8 years ago, Iowa, you lifted up a new leader for our country when we were in some dire straits, this close to being plunged into a second Great Depression because of the recklessness and the greed on Wall Street. Millions of people lost their jobs and lost their homes. And President Obama stepped up to make the best decisions for all of us. And now, we can look over our shoulders and see that thanks to his good work, thanks to Democratic leadership, thanks to Iowa pointing the way forward, we have now achieved 70 months in a row of positive job growth in the United States. And that is the very good news. As the Vice President said, we can build upon the good things that President Obama has, and we must. Because you talk to your neighbors, the pessimism out there, the apprehension about the future. The truth we need to own, if we're going to have any credibility to fix it and to build upon President Obama's legacy, is this: that we still have work to do. Because for the first time this side of World War II, because of the bad trickle-down economic decisions that were made for 30 years before President Obama stepped in, 70% of us are today earning the same or less than we were 12 years ago. And that's the first time that's happened this side of World War II. That is not how our economy is supposed to work. That's not how our country is supposed to work. Poorer people are becoming poorer even though they're working harder. Our middle class is still shrinking. There is a widening opportunity gap here in the land of opportunity. And this sort of economic injustice will not solve itself. What America needs is new leadership. And we need to solve it. And the good news is this: we don't have to invent a new formula. We just have to do that which made us a great economy that our parents and grandparents built for us. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the actions, not the words, but the actions, to restore common sense wage and labor policies, like raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, however we can there. Paying equal pay for equal work between men and women. Because when women succeed, America succeeds. Right? Paid family leave. We're the last developed nation on the planet that doesn't have paid family leave. And we need to upgrade our labor laws so that we make it easier and not harder for people to join unions and bargain collectively for better wages for all of us. Here's another one for you. Want to make wages go up instead of down? Then let's do as our parents and grandparents did. We are a nation of nations. We are a nation of immigrants. All of our people at some point, most all of our people, came here from someplace else. You want to make wages go up? Then let's get 11 million of our neighbors out of the underground, off-the-book shadow economy by passing comprehensive immigration reform now. Have you seen some of these Republican debates? These guys actually want to privatize, financialize, give over to Wall Street, or cut Social Security.
Yeah.
I say we expand Social Security, and I put forward a plan to do exactly that. This is the genius of our nation. When 70% of economic growth comes from consumer spending and consumer demand, we can't be surprised if growth isn't what we'd like it to be when 70% of us are earning the same or less than we were 12 years ago. We've got a demand problem. But when our workers earn more, they spend more. Our economy grows. And that's the genius of our nation. Second genius is that we make our country stronger. There are some investments we can only make together. The people of India and the people of China have nations of their own to invest in. We need to make investments in our country, in research and development and cures, human solutions to human problems, in the infrastructure that unites us, right? Transportation, cyber, rural broadband, rail, the things that actually make our economy go, and oh, by the way, create jobs when we make them. And there's another genius that's allowed us to close the opportunity gap every generation. And what is that? That we make investments in the brain power and the skills of our people. You see, our economy isn't money. It's people. It's all of our people. And in every generation, we have made the dream of college more widely available to more of our people. And so I have put forward a plan. And by the way, historic moment here for us. No candidate for president has ever appeared before you in Davenport, Iowa, with a greater mountain of college debt over his head. My wife and I were very proud of our daughters when they graduated, one from Georgetown, one from Charleston. And we're going to be proud every month for the rest of our life. You got to laugh because it hurts too bad to cry. We're the only nation on the planet that saddles our graduating cohorts of kids with the mountain of debt. John Kennedy said that to govern is to choose. I say progress is a choice. I put forward a plan to move us to debt-free college in the next 5 years and a plan for how it's made. And finally, the great challenges of our times are not things we run from as Americans. They are things we square our shoulders to. They are things that we come together in order to confront or in order to solve. We are the greatest country of problem solvers, of innovators that ever came together to form a republic. And that is because our diversity is our strength. Yeah. Look at this room. Our diversity is our strength, and the most important things that unite us are our American values, our American freedoms, our American beliefs. And we have work to do today. The whole nature of warfare has changed. And in confronting this threat of ISIL, we don't confront it by surrendering our American values. We confront ISIL by holding true to our American values. We don't confront ISIL by issuing ID cards based on faith to Americans. This is not an ordinary election year. The leader for the Republican Party's nomination, that immigrant-bashing carnival barker, Donald Trump, he finds that his numbers go up the more overtly his fascist appeals become. We know where this leads. First, it's American Muslims. Who's next? Catholics? Trade unionists? Artists? We know where that leads, and that's not forward. Every year since the attacks of September 11th, my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans alike, elected me year in and year out to be one of their two leaders on Homeland Security and preparedness. Protecting the homeland is almost like your immune system. It doesn't outnumber the bad bugs, but it's better connected. It can adapt more quickly. And that's how we confront this threat here in the homeland. And with coalitions abroad, as the President is doing, challenging other nations in the region to do the important work of securing their own territory. Second big challenge and is this. Climate change. The greatest business opportunity to come to the United States. It's all how you look at it, isn't it? And here again, Iowa, you're pointing the way forward. Today in Iowa, I do believe now, 35% of your electric energy comes from clean Iowa wind that wasn't there 15 years ago. Employs 4,000 people or more now in a new industry. And the great thing about those big component parts that you see rolling down your highway, they're too damn big for it to make any sense to import them from China. They got to build them here in the United States. I am the only candidate in either party to put forward a plan to move us to a 100% clean electric grid by 2050 and create 5 million jobs along the way. That's new leadership, and that's what our nation needs. And so, Iowa, it is caucus time. This is the time when you show the entire world that here in our country, it's the individual citizen that holds the highest title of all. A few weeks ago, months ago now, I put forward 15 goals to move our country forward, to rebuild the truth of the American dream that we share. Some of them I touched on. Some of them others include things like eradicating childhood hunger in the United States in the next 5 years. Cutting deaths from gun violence in half in the next 10 years. Offering national service as a universal option in order to cut youth unemployment in half in the next 3 years. These are the goals. As an executive, I learned that there's a difference between a dream and a goal. And it's a deadline. As a mayor and as a governor, I have learned how to bring people together over some pretty deep divides. And that's what our country needs right now. New leadership. Not part of the old ideological wars in Washington of the last 40 years, no. We need new leadership that's able to talk to everybody, that's able to bring people together, that's able to get things done. I would never say that Republicans are my enemy. Republicans aren't my enemy. They're not your enemy. They're our neighbors. They're our colleagues. They're our uncles. Right? We are all in this together. And the goals that I put forward and the goals that I have pledged my candidacy to accomplish are goals that are worthy of a truly great people. These times are challenging times. These times are changing times. We must craft a new foreign policy of engagement and collaboration. We must craft a new national security strategy that does a better job of identifying threats, looking over the horizon and reducing them before we're backed into military quagmires. But make no mistake about it, both of those things depend upon our making ourselves stronger here at home, building an economy that works for all of us. There's a lot of people that have said to me, well, Governor, clock's ticking, you face a tough fight. But there's a lot of people that would look at you and say that you face a tough fight, giving your children and grandchildren a better future than the life you've enjoyed yourself. Well, you know what? I've always been drawn to a tough fight. I kind of like a tough fight. I didn't run for mayor of Baltimore in 1999 because things were going well.
No, they weren't.
And when the recession hit, I led my state through that recession. Not because times were easy, but because times were hard and because it was a tough fight. I think maybe the toughness of the fight is the way the hidden God has of telling us that we're actually fighting for something worth saving. It's time, Iowa. Our country's worth saving. The American dream is worth saving. Our children's future is worth saving, and this planet is worth saving. We have 24 days to bend the arc of history and to move our country forward. I need your help, and I thank you so much for coming out here tonight. This is what America is all about. Questions and answers. And if you have answers, I hope you raise your hand first. Yes.
Can I read my question?
You can read it if you like.
So I recently graduated from college, and a lot of my peers are worried about climate change. And I was wondering if you see certain environmental leaders like Bill McKibben when they say that in order to save the planet, we have to shrink our economy and reduce our standards of living closer to the size of Ethiopia. As a young person just entering the economy, that's pretty scary for me. And I was wondering if you would agree with Bill McKibben that America should live more like Ethiopia.
No, I don't agree with that. No, this is where I think we go astray as a party. You know, the great American Thomas Merton once said that any appeal that begins from a standpoint of despair is bound to fail. So this future that we seek, a clean, green energy future, isn't about scarcity. It's about prosperity. It's not about less security, it's about more. It's not about less opportunity, it's about more. There are already more people employed in a nascent solar industry and wind industry than there is in all of coal. And that's without your nation even breaking a sweat. No, this isn't about less. This is about more. And not only do we have an imperative to stave off the sort of mass migrations, droughts and the other things that come with climate change and that imperil our ongoing story with this planet. But no, this is a business opportunity. It's not about less, it's about more. But we've got to act and seize on it to make it ours. You know, we didn't leave the Stone Age behind because we ran out of rocks. Right? Time marches on. You got to embrace new technologies. And when you do, there's so much new work that needs to be done. A cleaner designed, built environment. That creates jobs. A new grid network in order to harness the potential, say, of offshore wind off of those population centers on the East Coast, in order to harness solar in the Southwest, in order to make the investments in next-generation nuclear technologies so we're not living in fear of old technologies going awry. No, this is a future of more, not a future of less. Yes, sir, in the back in the corner.
Governor Mike, can you talk about the future of the military and your thoughts with that?
Sure, thank you. And are you ex-military?
Sure.
Current. Thank you for your service. Broadly, or with regard to our treatment of veterans, or America's role in the world, or
Let's talk about veterans.
veterans. Yeah. One of the 15 goals I've put forward for our country is full employment for our veterans. We do a very poor job of managing the transition of citizens that have given their all for us, sometimes in multiple tours of duty. When they come home, we need them just as much to transition back to civilian life. We don't do a very good job of that. On the DD-214 that you fill out, there's not even a box on there for your email address. And a lot of our soldiers and sailors and Marines come home and they become ghost people. They become lost to us. As a governor, we had our own VA administration, as most states do. But the handoff from the Department of Defense to your state VA is next to non-existent. And it doesn't need to be that way. And what I found the greatest entree to our veterans, making sure they get the support they need, the services they need, is the employment counseling, especially if you have another veteran doing it as part of that one-stop shop. So that's the entree to the other things that we need to work on, to reduce suicides, to improve the health and well-being of our veterans, to make sure the mental health and the ability to cope with the stress that so many of our people come home with. These are all things we need to do a much better job of. One of the things I've learned how to do as an executive is turn around really moribund and underperforming departments. And I had some that were quite a challenge.
Yes.
But this is what I've learned in the course of doing these things, and entrepreneurial mayors are doing this all over the country. If you embrace openness and transparency and performance measurement, if you call your managers to a common platform, if you create a compelling scoreboard, if you do away with the anonymity that often shields bureaucrats from responsibility, and instead make it all plain in the same way that the private sector can do pretty detailed customer service, right? We can reform our entire federal government. As mayor, I created a program called City Stat that did exactly that. Usually in government, in the past, we measured one thing, and that was inputs, annually in the budget. Mark Morial of the U.S. Conference of Mayors once said to me, Mayor, if you ever want to hide something, put it in the city budget or the city charter. Nobody ever reads either one. So I created a program called City Stat. We won the Innovations in Government Award from Harvard. That's an extra H.
Yes.
Mayors emulated it all over the country. One call for customer service, 311, common platforms, measuring performance. Every week asking whether we're doing better this week than we were last week. And I brought that same approach to state government, reducing pollution into the waters of the Chesapeake Bay, cutting in half the number of kids that we were putting in foster homes, and instead healing the family. And I look forward to bringing FedStat to a White House near you and reforming the Veterans Department and making it function at a much higher and more collaborative level. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering what your position on is moving mental health forward. I mean, it's a national problem.
Yes.
And so you touched a little bit on it with veterans, but in general, how you feel like that your position would be able to change.
Right. And it varies state to state, doesn't it? Whether or not you and your family have the options for the mental health options that you might need becomes very contingent upon what state you live in. And some states, they try to cut as much as they can. No great people ever cut their way to prosperity or cut their way to greater security. In my own state, I increased access to public mental health services by 80% during my time as governor. And the reason I did that was because I saw as mayor that when we tried to treat drug addiction without also addressing the mental health issues, it was like playing whack-a-mole.
Right.
And so I think we need to strive and take actions that bring better parity to mental health services. The Affordable Care has done this somewhat, but so much depends on what the states do. And I think we need a way to incentivize the states, create a block grant program, move to greater parity, and have some better performance measures so that we can attract mental health professionals to parts of the country where historically they're not inclined to go because of the pay. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome you to Iowa. I don't want to alarm you, but we may be distant relatives. I've got several O'Malley's generations. So,
I hear there's 84 of you in the state.
well, it could be. That's not mine, the generations back. So, a couple of educators right here. And No Child Left Behind was thankfully finally repealed. But some of the intent was good, and there are some places in the country that lag far behind, and we do want them to catch up. We don't want to leave them behind, which is what that program did. So, but the problem is, as teachers, they just keep putting new programs on and new threats, and we live under the threat of getting our school closed, and losing time to prep so we can go to a meeting and have somebody come in that quit teaching and now they want to tell us how to teach when they couldn't hack it in the classroom to begin with. So
You sound like my daughter.
So my question is, what type of program do you have that's going to allow us teachers to just concentrate on teaching?
Yeah, I think it's almost more of an approach than a program. In my own state, in the middle of the recession, unlike Governor Branstad, we actually increased public education funding by 37%. We made our public schools #1 in America, according to Education Week magazine, 5 years in a row. And part of the approach was a collaborative approach, treating teachers with the dignity and respect that their profession deserves. You would never talk to a CEO in private industry that makes his workers out to be the enemy. Right? I mean, how do you get things done if that's the way it goes? So we built feedback loops. We would survey our teachers every other year to learn about how we were doing in implementing Common Core, or to learn about the learning environment in the classroom, the leadership in the school, which is so critically important. And nobody ever likes feedback on that, right? We also went to full-day kindergarten in our state. We also were able to address the inequities sometimes in school funding when poor jurisdictions, because of their tax base, can't afford to provide an adequate education. We had to raise some taxes to do that. I had to raise the sales tax by a penny. I put forward a progressive income tax, asked the top 14% of us to pay more. But our parents and our kids did not disappoint. More of our kids take and pass AP-related STEM courses in Maryland today than any other state in the union. Let me give you a few thoughts on where I think the mission we share together as Americans of educating our kids at a higher and better level is going. I believe that there is no better investment we can make in the potential of our people than universal pre-K. And I'm in favor of universal pre-K. At the other end of the learning spectrum, I think we have an opportunity to reform our high schools so that by the time kids graduate, they have a year or a half a year of college credit that they can transfer up, and they have a certificate for a skill that's actually in demand in today's world. And between those levels, we've had a lot of debates about minimum standards and what the curriculum should be for internationally benchmarked standards. And that's all fine and good. But what we're best at as a people is teaching our kids how to solve problems, how to think conceptually. That's our strength as a nation and our economy. But that requires reinstilling music and art, environmental sciences. And there's never been a better opportunity to really tap the imaginations of our kids. It's the coming together, if you will, of what we've now learned about cognitive science, how individuals learn best, and our ability to blend that on an iPad instead of a textbook and be able to present that to our kids to create personalized learning experiences even in a classroom setting. So I think we're only scratching the surface of this. But that's I think where the future is. In the corner, yes sir.
How you doing today, Governor?
Good, what's your name?
My name is Reginald Odell. I'm with a faith-based organization called the Faith Coalition for the Common Good. We're out of Springs, Illinois. Our current government is familiar. And what we do a lot of work to try to change the dominant narrative, work on stuff like systematic racism. And a big question a lot of people concerned people try to run away from is like the thing that's going on with police brutality and stuff like that. What's your views on that? What do you plan on doing about that?
Thank you. Tell me your first name again?
Reginald.
Thank you. Yeah, there's no issues more painfully intertwined for us as Americans, given our legacy of racial brutality, cruelty, and injustice, than the issues of racial injustice in America and criminal justice in America. And of all the candidates running for president, none of us has been on the front lines of that as consistently as I have. When I was right out of law school, I was a prosecutor in the Western District of Baltimore. That was the area that you saw erupt after Freddie Gray's death recently. I was on the city council for 2 terms. I ran for mayor and put my city on a path for the biggest tenure reduction in crime. And as you might imagine, every day I ran, we talked about not only how we would improve the responsiveness of our police, because quite honestly, in 1999, If you called from a wealthier neighborhood, black or white, the police always came and they always got out of their cars. But if you called from a poorer neighborhood, the vast majority of which were black, they hardly ever came. And when they did, they never got out of their cars. So in addition to talking about how we improve policing, how we push back on the open-air drug markets that we had allowed to take over whole swaths of our city, where we buried over 300 young black men every year for 20 years. We also talked about how to improve policing our police, how to improve training our police, how to improve in the recruitment of our police so that the diversity of our force more properly reflected the diversity of the people that our police officers are serving. So I have put, as governor, I reduced not only violent crime to 30-year lows, but I also reduced our incarceration rate to 20-year lows. And in the course of this campaign, I have rolled out a new agenda for criminal justice reform in our country. Just as we require local police departments to report the top 7, what they call the UCR crimes, murder, rape, robbery, burglary, auto theft, we should require departments to report their discourtesy, their excessive force, their use of lethal force. 3 of the 4 lowest years of fatal police-involved shootings were achieved during my time as mayor. I was reelected with 88% of the vote because I delivered on the things I promised people we would do. 100 reverse integrity stings a year, adequately staffing our internal affairs division, giving the Civilian Review Board its own 2 detectives so that they could investigate any case they wanted to, being out and with the people I serve at community meetings every night, giving out the phone number for the Civilian Review Board so citizens and police officers alike could hear that and know that we were holding one another accountable and recruiting to the highest degrees ever African American membership in our police department. No mayor can make his city immune from setbacks, but we learned what worked and we did more of it. And when we found things that didn't work, we stopped doing them. Among them, the death penalty. Expensive, not a deterrent, always unjustly applied. And we repealed it. And there's more online. If you go, the name of the talk on my website is martino'malley.com, by the way. And the name of the talk, I rolled out this agenda at the Urban League about 2 months ago. It's called To Save and Redeem More Lives. We also restored voting rights to 52,000 people. We decriminalized. And the hits go on and on. We decriminalized the possession of small amounts of marijuana. We made sure our police officers issued stop tickets so that we tracked that to see that there wasn't those disparities. Openness, transparency. You're hearing a theme, right? Yes. Yes.
Hi, Governor O'Malley. Thank you for coming. I'm a college student. I'm studying chemistry at WashU, and so a big concern of mine is NIH funding.
WashU?
Yeah, so Johns Hopkins, from WashU frequently compete the NIH funding.
Yeah.
So, you know, as I was reading just before I got here, actually, it's not that I'm well informed, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about this at a national level. So, while in 2008, I see that you have committed $1.1 billion for biotech funding. And I want to bring this back to the NIH. The NIH funding is very hard to get, as I'm sure you know, and it frequently is clustered to universities like WashU and Johns Hopkins. But what about the University of Iowa, which always also need to get involved in basic science research, and they don't have necessarily the industry support to do as much basic science research, such as schools like Harvard, Johns Hopkins.
What's your major?
Chemistry. Economics.
Okay. When our nation now invests in non-defense discretionary investments. That would be things like NIH, as well as our infrastructure, as well as affordable college. We invest half as much today as percentage of our GDP as we did when I was in high school.
Exactly.
And we need to do better. So I am in favor of actually increasing funding for the investments that we need to do in every generation to move our country forward. That includes NIH. And so I'd look to create, as well as a few other things as well. You wanted to follow up or interject?
So that's, of course, I agree with you. We should increase NIH funding, but a lot of people want to increase NIH funding. And how is this going to happen, given a lot of the political battles with NIH funding? Because it's
this is the most common question all across the nation. I think if I'm understanding your question.
Yes.
How are you going to work with Congress? Is that your
Yes.
question?
Yeah, and specifically with NIH funding, if
Yeah.
you don't have, because a lot of NIH funding, I'm sure you know much more than I do, but it's a lot has to do with the industry support in the region for who gets NIH funding.
Yeah. One of the most recurrent questions that's asked by your neighbors all across the country and here in Iowa is this: how are you going to work with this Congress?
Yeah.
And when it's asked as if in this impermanent world, this Congress is going to be here forever. So let me assure you, just as you and I won't be here forever, neither will this Republican Congress be forever. Every election is the opportunity for a new Congress. And I think a way to maybe recraft your question, if I may, because this is a choice between three candidates in our party. And I would suggest that the better question is, which of the three of us has the best chance of being able to pull people together, to move us forward out of these rather gridlocked, self-defeating times? I would not have been able to get the things done in my city or in my state if I were a divider or if I were a divisive force. I bring people together to get things done. I figured I had a responsibility to get to know the Republican members of the legislature just as well, if not better, than the Democratic members of the legislature. I figured that's the reason they gave me the free rent and the big mansion. To invite people over to break bread. We used to do bipartisan pizza nights. And my legislative director said to me in one bipartisan pizza night, he said, "Why do you invite Senator so-and-so? He votes against all of our stuff. He never says anything kind about what this administration's accomplished. And just an hour ago, he was trash-talking you on the floor of the Senate, and you invited him to bipartisan pizza night." I said, "Joe, it's only pepperoni." So we need to find a way to reinforce the strength of our soft ties. We need to move through these times. I don't have an easy button or a way to pole vault. But part of what compels me to run is I looked at the choices our country would have, and I truly believe out of all the men and women running in both parties, I offer our country the best hope to move us forward and to heal our nation's politics. There's nothing so wrong with our nation's politics that it can't be healed with new leadership and the love we have for one another and the very powerful things that unite us as a people. Yes, sir.
Comment on the current status of health care with regard specifically to the Affordable Health Care Act, which is not necessarily affordable to many individuals, nor have I found that it provided enough health care that would be covered to provide basic needs for health maintenance. What's your take is on the current system, but don't be afraid to mention the word single.
There are some who say that maybe that was the way we should have gone, the Medicare for all. What we have to do right now is there's never been a program that was ever introduced perfect on arrival. And sadly, our rather gridlocked national politics keeps us from tweaking this and making the adjustments. However, at the state level, those adjustments can be made, somewhat. And I believe that there's opportunities to do that. So I'm in favor of the Affordable Care Act. But we've got to find better ways to offer products that cover the first dollars out of pocket so that you don't have the huge co-pays right up front that keeps you from getting the preventive and those sorts of things that you need. And I also think that there's avenues to reduce the cost. We still pay more for health care than any other people on the planet. And a lot of that is from the institutional hospital care at the center of the equation. In our own state, thanks to the Affordable Care Act and the Medicare waiver, we moved all of our hospitals out of paying them on a fee-for-service basis and instead started paying them global payments for all of their Medicaid and Medicare patients. And they were able to share in the savings if they could reduce the avoidable hospital room admissions and do a better job at keeping their people well, especially those of us who cope with chronic diseases, diabetes, asthma, congestive heart failure. And in the New England Journal of Medicine, it said, "I'll be darned, it actually worked." We saved $110 million in Medicare. I think that's the next hill. In so many of our equations, whether it's affordable college or affordable health care, we put the institution at the center of our policy choices instead of the wellness or the well-being or the learnedness of our people. Okay, follow up?
Just to follow up, comment that you probably are aware that our governor is turning our Medicaid insurance over to kind of for-profit organizations. That doesn't require a response from you or I, but I'm just letting everyone know that this is a sad state we're getting into. In less than 60 days, this will
Yeah, I think that's a mistake. In our own state, we had a lot of managed care organizations, but we didn't let them manage themselves. I mean, we oversaw them. And we had metrics in terms of improving wellness and things like that. Yes, sir.
Yes, Governor. Ed Curley, AFGE 2119, Rock Island Arsenal.
Rock Island Arsenal, largest employer in the Quad Cities, right?
Yes, sir.
8,400 people.
Approximately 8,700. Our manufacturing facility, JMTC, most of the employees on the island, sequestration has affected most of us middle class. They're trying to balance the budget on our backs. Last year we had 16 days that we furloughed and without pay. And I sat at home, and sequestration keeps rolling back up on the employees' back. AFGE currently has over 300,000 union members that are paying for this. Your thoughts on sequestration?
Yeah, I think sequestration cuts are mindless, and I think they're dangerous. And this is not the way. Nobody even intended these cuts to actually happen. That's the sad state of our gridlock national politics. They thought they'd put a mechanism in place that was so bad that surely it would drive people together. That didn't work. So now these are mindless ways to cut your budget. They're dangerous ways to cut your defense budget. And I'm not in favor of sequestration cuts. Look, having governed during the recession, I cut our own state budget by more than any governor in Maryland history. Probably a lot of governors that had to govern during that recession can say that. But at the same time, we actually increased our investment in education, increased our investment in transportation, went 4 years in a row without a penny's increase in college tuition, passed fair share legislation, extended collective bargaining to more state workers, extended collective bargaining actually to all of these local school districts as well, extended prevailing wage to school construction contracts, and passed Buy American legislation to import. So no, and we had a AAA bond rating all through the recession. And get this, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which hardly ever says nice things about Democratic governors, named us #1 for innovation and entrepreneurship. How about that? So treating people decently is also good for business.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time here, Kristen? Yes?
Would you give us your thoughts on these trade agreements? Not just the one that's being proposed, the TPP, but also the ones that have been in place for some time?
Yeah, I think they've been a big mistake. And I am opposed to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I was opposed to it a year ago, and I didn't change my position on it. I think we need to learn from experience. And I think what we've learned, we were given a lot of promises with regard to NAFTA. And what we got back were empty pockets and closed factories, like the Maytag facility. Where's that? In Newton. So we need to build up our own economy. I think these trade deals, first of all, I'm opposed to this trade deal because I'm opposed to trade deals our Congress is forced to vote on before we're allowed to read them. Yeah. That seems as a matter of principle to be un-American. But I'm also opposed to the creation of these new things, these ISDS, these international tribunals that allow governments, or excuse me, not governments, allow corporations, multinational corporations, to sue their own government or governments in order to evade labor and environmental standards that hurt their bottom line. And yet it also opens our markets and our workers to compete with countries like Vietnam. I've been to Vietnam, a lot of nice people in Vietnam, but their government doesn't allow people to even join labor unions. And so we're going to have our workers in manufacturing competing with them. That doesn't make sense. We have only once ever, in modern times, filed an action against a country that wasn't abiding by the terms of labor protections in the trade agreement. That was Guatemala. It was 7 years ago when they allowed a whole lot of labor organizers to be murdered down there. And it's still winding itself through an endless process. There's also nothing in this trade agreement with regard to currency manipulation, which has stolen a lot of our jobs. So, yes, we're in a global economy. I've led trade delegations all over the world. We should trade. But we shouldn't open up our markets and undermine our workers by allowing multinational corporations to do a rush to the lowest possible environmental and worker standards. I believe standards that are good for the United States are those that raise standards for workers and raise standards for the environment. I wish our nation had led with the agreement with Europe. I think that might have been a better model upon which today's featured things. But we need to build our own economy in a circulatory way, mindful that it's best that we actually produce here what we consume here. And it's an ecosystem, right? first job of the President of the United States is to protect the people of the United States. As a governor and as a mayor, every single day I woke up knowing that that was my responsibility in my city and my state. You learn how to form a security cabinet. You know that every day could be a different crisis, and you learn as a leader how to make sure you're inside the turning radius of that crisis so you can head it off. Governors have led our nation to victory in 2 world wars. And governors, I believe, have been able to do that because they understand what it means to collaborate. They understand what it means to build coalition. They have that discipline developed over time. So every year since the attacks of September 11th, I might have mentioned this before, I was always selected by my colleagues in the National Governors Association and the U.S. Conference of Mayors to be one of their 2 leaders on Homeland Security and Preparedness. The President appointed me to be one of the chairs of the Council of Governors, who by act of Congress is required to work and meet regularly with the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security to work out issues affecting the homeland. I have met with 20 or more heads of state in the course of my travels, and I believe that this is what's needed for these times. We need a new foreign policy of collaboration and engagement, not just in confronting genocidal evils when they arise, like ISIL, and we must confront ISIL, I believe. The best way to do it is in coalition with other nations who need to provide the ground forces to secure that region and keep it from becoming another safe haven again after this iteration of this threat is put down. I believe that to support that, we should use special ops. I believe we also should be prepared to use close air support and other technological support. But I also believe there's other ways to be engaged and collaborate in this way. I think we need to get out of the old Cold War mentality that would have us go roaming the globe for dictators to topple. That doesn't necessarily make the world a safer place. What do we have to confront in this day and age? We have to confront the sort of nation-state collapse. Not only can happen in the Middle East, by the way, where we kind of knocked over one of those nations, right? That's half of the problem here. I was opposed to the invasion of Iraq. It was the biggest blunder, one of the biggest blunders in modern American history, and we're still paying a price for it. But other areas of collaboration is on climate change. How proud were you all of our nation and President Obama in those Paris agreements? 190-some nations agreeing that we're going to move in the first direction. Confronting epidemics, getting ahead of the train when it comes to Ebola, and a better response for that's regional. Securing sea lanes, as we're now seeing other nations stepping up to do their part off of Africa. You see regional alliances like the African Union pushing back on al-Shabaab in Somalia. So that's the approach. We need to be engaged in this world, but that's going to require other nations to step up. And on national security, we need to do a better job of anticipating threats and taking action earlier. One of the things that the Republicans scoffed and laughed at was when I said, because of climate change, there was a huge drought that swept over the Fertile Crescent a number of years ago that includes Syria. That drove farmers and people off their land and drove them to cities where their government didn't have the ability to feed its own people and care for its own people. People rose up. It was repressed. That led to civil war. That led to near nation-state collapse. That led to the vacuum. That led to the safe haven out of which ISIL grew. And we need to be better at identifying these sorts of threats to nation-states. Here's another one for you. In our own hemisphere, in Central America. The challenge in Central America, the challenge is not to intern more women and children in for-profit detention camps in the United States. The enduring symbol of our country is not the barbed wire fence. It's the Statue of Liberty. And we need to take action in Central America with those countries to restore rule of law, to push back against the death gangs and the narco states that are cropping up there and threaten our own security here at home. So I see a new anticipatory national security.
Governor, we've got time for one more question.
One more question.
Governor O'Malley.
Two more. We'll do like you.
I'm the Reverend Clark Olson Smith,
Reverend
and I'm
Clark Olson
here to
Smith.
introduce you to some of my powerful friends.
Okay.
I'm the president of Quad Cities Interfaith, and I'm also the vice president of Gamaliel of Illinois and Iowa. We believe that people of faith have an important role in the political and common life of our country beyond just providing charity. So we work for racial and economic justice in both of these states. And so I want to introduce you to some of our work and to some of our key leaders and our other presidents of local affiliates. Here in the Quad Cities, we are working on jobs. We're working on comprehensive immigration reform. We're working on restorative justice. Here is what we did. This just last year, 2015. I also want to introduce you to Manuel Medina. He's the president of the Coast and Neighbors Community Organization.
Good to meet you again.
Meet you again. And we saw each other in Chicago?
Right, in Chicago. But two of the issues that we really are very concerned about, especially, immigration, comprehensive immigration, and also education. So I'm very glad to see that your goal 5, 6, and 7 touches upon those. And I also know that a lot of my colleagues have other concerns, and when I look through this, most of them coincide with your 15 goals. So we want to show you our support and also push you from that.
Thanks a lot.
You.
Thank you.
Reverend Norman Patterson, president of the United Congregations of Metro East and East St. Louis.
We have a unique situation in Southern Illinois, and we've teamed up with Gamaliel of Illinois and Iowa because we want to work together. And nationwide, we represent about 90,000 people. And so the issues that we have across this country is jobs in the construction trades, jobs that help to provide employment to minorities who are going to redo the infrastructure across this nation. We want to know, wherever you go, however you get there, are you going to have a relationship with us?
Yes, ma'am.
Reverend Johnson is the president of the Faith Coalition for the Common Good, Springfield, Illinois.
One of our priorities is the high-speed rail. As you know, the home state of our President Barack Obama and the Faith Coalition, and we want to put in your hands some of our top priorities in our last year information.
Thank you. I got some reading on the way to Dubuque.
A little bit more, the Reverend David Bigsby. He's the president of Gamaliel Metro Chicago.
Thank you for noticing. Yeah, we're a better nation than this. These ice raids are awful, the way they're breaking up families.
Last but not least, we have Deacon Levin Trailer. He is the president of the South Suburban Action Conference, South Chicago.
How you doing?
All right, Mr. Ryan. I'm president of an organization called South Suburban Action Conference. We're located in Lansing, Illinois, but we service the south side of Chicago and the suburbs, the southern suburbs. And my major focus right now is jobs and education. Just want to put that out there for you.
We're the only species without full employment. No progress without jobs. I put forward an agenda. It's also on our website. We haven't had an agenda to reinvest in our cities and towns since Jimmy Carter. And I see threefold investments. One is in workforce housing that can seed a whole new generation of buildings that are living and that create more energy than they consume. I see the investments in mass transit and transit options, because one of the biggest impediments to upward economic mobility is lack of mobility itself. And the third one I see is the investments in the sort of, Daniel Patrick Moynihan said cities that cease to build begin to decline. There is so much building that has to take place in cities. It's where all of the energy is used, and yet where the great amounts of energy are actually wasted. There's so much work to be done in demolition and reconstruction and building a new green built environment in our cities. And I think the cities can be the leading edge on this. It's where the intractable unemployment is still the highest, and it's where the greatest amount of work needs to be done.
Here's our question. We are moving power.
They're slick, aren't they?
We're moving powerfully across these two states. We have people in denominations, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Unitarian, Buddhist. We want to know if you will continue to be in relationship with us. if you will assign one of your staff persons to be a liaison to us, these organizations in these 2 states with me personally, and if you'll do that, and we'll be in contact in the next 30 days.
Awesome. Okay. Sean, you're it. Sean is the most popular member of my staff. Best story. Let's do 2 quick follow-ups. Yes?
Could you explain your national service? What are you talking about for the young people?
I'm talking about, we turn away 3/4 of the young people that apply to serve in either AmeriCorps or other sorts of national service. So whether it's environmental restoration, public health, it could be in a new Green Jobs Corps.
So you want to refund these to the fullest.
I want to fully fund them and make it an option so that we turn no kid away.
That's right.
And if they want to do national service for a year. No? No? Okay. Well, that might be it. Well, look, one more. Yes, sir. If it's a good one.
I'm a Will. I met Will 3 times.
My son Will?
Yeah, your son Will. Oh. And I keep asking myself, I have 7 sons. I have 6 sons. But that was kids. And I ask myself, why does he support Stan? But he supports you 100%.
He's a great kid. He sent me an email. I was here in Iowa, and he sent me an email, and he said, Dad, I'm speaking to 250 Democrats in Stafford, in New Hampshire, tomorrow, right after burning. Yes. Yes. You read that last sentence correctly. Thank you. Well, look, Iowa, I need you. I would love for you to caucus for me. We've got 24 days to go to bend the arc of history and move our country forward. There's nothing wrong with our politics or our economy that we don't have the ability to fix. And we're going to begin to do that when all of you, not NBC, not the big banks of Wall Street, not big money, when all of you make your voice heard on caucus night. I need your help. New leadership, let's move America forward. Thank you.